Hey, Derek.
Good day, NJ. How are you today?
Not too bad yourself.
Well, still thinking about our last episode.
Yeah, it was nerve-wracking. During
Well,
that first the first broadcast was it really ramped up the nerves.
it didn't show. I broke my rule of going back and watching a bit of it afterwards, because I find that I can be overly critical when I do that. And I thought you were completely natural, honest, and knowledgeable. So I think that's what this is all about. I think that's why people are coming here.
True. So yeah, just basically for the audience, just want to have a quick human moment. I am neurodivergent, so the last time, as we just discussed, my nerves absolutely got the better of me. Live shows hit very different, and so in this episode we are going to slow things down a bit. I'm going to go back, fill in some of the blanks that I left out last time because I was nervous, and yeah. But before we do that, I want to get the legal stuff out of the way. So this channel dives into often brutal crimes, most of which are rooted in hate, bigotry, and deep injustice. If you're sensitive to graphic details or harsh truths, consider this your warning. Viewer discretion is seriously advised. The opinions shared are not always those of us, the hosts, but the facts. They speak loud and clear. Hate is dedicated to uncovering crimes against the LGBTQIA+ community, and if you're here to push homophobia, transphobia, or any kind of hate, we suggest you unsubscribe, log off, maybe interrogate your life choices. So yes, this place is a space for truth, justice, and giving voice to those in the world that the world has tried to silence. Right. Okay. So, seeing as you guys are here already, if you haven't already, please like the video, subscribe, smash all the buttons, and I think maybe Derek, let's get into it.
Let's go.
Right. So, like I said, I want to start off by swinging back, and I want to go over some of last week's videos. The audience is welcome to go and watch episode 1, but for those who haven't seen episode 1 yet, I'm gonna cover the important stuff, and so you don't have to go and wade through my nerves. So let's start off by talking about Cape Town in 2003. It was a weird time in Cape Town. Fun and parties and carefree living, but also bombings and gangs and violence. And the seedy underworld was slowly moving away from the previously disadvantaged areas and into areas like Seapoint. Areas known for high property prices and being the playground of the rich and famous were suddenly seeing other people. Now, you'll recall last week, LCB Brits, the crime and court reporter. One of the clips I wanted to play last week, but it got skipped due to a technical glitch, is where she talks about Cape Town's reputation as a queer-friendly city, and she was asked whether she feels that Cape Town deserves this reputation. Here's what she said.
Very, very lively, very open, but there's always an undercurrent. One could say it's accepting of gay people, but not if you're a black lesbian in Kainlecha. I wouldn't say that. There are numerous attacks on females being killed for who they are, or the so-called corrective rape, to rape a lesbian to correct her. So yes, open, fine, nice and friendly, but it's not everywhere like that. So I wouldn't say it's completely friendly. I think there's a bit of that what it was before is a bit lost. Yeah, Sea Point was cool. It's a place to be. It was. There were a few gay clubs, and it was a nice and friendly area to be. And I found it to be safe. I wasn't scared to go there. But then there was also another bomb explosion. That was a bit earlier, I would say 2000, under correction, but in that time, at Magoo's Bar, which was also a gay venue outside of the venue.
Okay, so I think what Elsie was referring to was Blah Bar. Now, I actually used to go to Blah Bar after the bombing. And it was a gay bar on what was known as the Pink Strip in Greenpoint. A pipe bomb was placed inside the venue, which was unusually quiet for that night. It happened on the 5th of November, 1999. Now, the Magoo's Bar bombing that she mentioned was actually a bombing in Durban during the apartheid years in 1986. Both were political in nature, but for very different reasons. Nobody died in the bar bombing, unlike with Magoo, where 3 people were killed and I think it was something like 65 or 70 people were injured. But Blah Bar had considerable injuries, mainly shrapnel injuries. And if memory serves, one of the victims of Blah Bar actually lost part of their foot.
NJ?
Yeah.
You know, thinking back, does that type of violence still pervade? You know, the corrective rapes, the bombings, is that still going on in South Africa 25 years later?
No, the corrective rapes are very much still a thing. That is very much a thing. Actually, I think we may have touched on it briefly in the episode that you and I met on. Which was the Annika and Joey.
Yeah. Yep.
But corrective rape is still very, very, very pervasive. Bombings, not so much. Cape Town in 1999, 98, 99, 2000, there was a spate of bombings, mostly claimed by a group called PAGAD, which is People Against Drugs and Gangsterism or something, which basically turned into a bit of a what's the word? Extremist group themselves. But they bombed Planet Hollywood in Cape Town. They bombed, well, actually, Elsie can go into more detail on this. She does actually discuss that.
I'm sorry to go down this rabbit hole a bit, but you know, Cape Town sounds like any wonderful city that could be in anywhere in North America. You know, the bombings, the violence is something that we've seen in North America, but this corrective rape phenomena is not one that I'm familiar with. Does that happen or in other places around the world that you know of, or is that more or less an African type of phenomena? And perhaps I'm just naive.
It seems to be a South African thing. Corrective rape it's shockingly pervasive.
And such a strange term, corrective rape. It just doesn't make sense.
No, it's become. You'll actually say, if you look at the crime statistics in South Africa, and how many well-known people. There was that footballer that her name escapes me at the moment. She played for the South African women's football team. She was raped and murdered. It's like I said, it seems to be very much a South African thing. It may happen elsewhere in the world. I wouldn't be surprised if it is, but we gave it a name.
Yeah, right.
We have a tendency to give things a name, and then we become known for that. For example, racism has been a thing all over the world, and segregation has been a thing all over the world. We called it apartheid.
Right.
And that has become a worldwide known term. Corrective rape seems to be the same thing. It may happen elsewhere in the world, but we gave it a name, and we now own this horror.
Well, congratulations on being pervasive branders of horrible incidents.
Anyway, yeah, it's just we like I said, we have a tendency to name shit.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah.
Anyway, let's get back to Elsterby.
There were many. They were at Constantia shopping centre. It started with just before 2000 at Planet Hollywood, and then St Elmo's in Camps Bay, the Magoo's Bar, the Bronx Bar, in front of Observatory, at the Ops Cafe, which is also a very trendy, nice neighbourhood. There was several. There was also a bomb found before it exploded in Durbanville somewhere. I saw the bomb before it exploded. That was also just luck. Several bombs.
Good.
Yeah, so that was Cape Town in late 99, early 2000s. Nobody was ever charged with the bombings. They just kind of assumed that it didn't happen. Just, that there was no one to be held responsible, which personally I think is utter bullshit. But it, as with so many crimes that I've covered, it's a case of, for me as a podcaster and a YouTuber, I can explore the less provable aspects of a crime,
Right.
Which investigators can't really. They need to stick to the facts, what can be proved in court, and because the last thing you want is to have someone incarcerated without due process. Not that I'm saying anything about any other country in the world that does that.
I don't live in that one.
But yes, we do have to with most true crime cases, we do have to accept that it's not only what we know, it's what we can prove.
Right.
Whereas I don't have that. I have a bit more freedom than that.
Yes. Well,
So I want to move on to what Sizzlers was. Now, Sizzlers, and actually any male-to-male massage studio, as it is termed, it's more than just a brothel. Okay, it's basically chosen family. You tend to form a bond with the guys you work with, and it's a sanctuary in a hostile world. Not just a sanctuary for those working there, but also for the clients. Now, I actually mentioned this on one of my previous episodes. I think it was my discussion with Nicole Engelbrecht, where I often said that sex work is a service on a par with hairdressing. Someone comes in feeling unloved and unappealing. We spend a period of time with them where the guy is entirely my focus, and he leaves feeling like $1 million. My view is not shared by many hairdressers.
But it's an interesting observation in terms of what it does for the clientele, why they're there, what they're seeking, whether it's validation, pleasure, some form of enjoyment. That's a really, really interesting analogy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so next up, now that we've gotten Cape Town out of the way, I feel that I dropped the ball with regard to the victims last time. And I want to go through the victims one by one, give them a proper tribute, and remember their names. Okay, so first of all, we have Timothy Boyd. Now, at 29, Timothy was the oldest among the Sizzlers staff. Timothy had been planning his exit from the industry, dreaming of a new chapter, and those who knew him called him down to earth and well brought up. Then we have Sergio de Castro. Now, a young man who survived a hard childhood, 22-year-old Sergio clung fiercely to hope. He dreamed of becoming a web designer, a dream he fought for, sending CVs by hand, working odd jobs, and then he was also a singer in the choir at St. Mary's Cathedral. Then we have Stephanus Fischer. At 17 years old, Stephanus, who worked under the name Ryan, was the youngest of the Sizzlers victims, a kid who lied about his age to survive. His dreams were simple. He wanted to save enough money to finish school, but he never got the chance. Next, we have Johan Meyer. Johan was a young man from Johannesburg, and he hoped to build a better life in Cape Town. The 19-year-old family couldn't afford to bring his body home after the tragedy. There were strangers who stepped forward to help. Winnie Madikizela Mandela, the first wife of Nelson Mandela, who was at the time the leader of the African National Congress, helped repatriate his remains. Next, we have Marius Meyer. From a small town in the Northern Cape, 21-year-old Marius had struggled to find work. His mother refused to let his death be defined by judgment, simply saying he was a good person. Then we have Travis Reed. Charismatic and stylish, Travis, who worked under the name Max, lived big and bold. A lover of life, of gadgets, of revelry, he had recently celebrated his 20th birthday. His mother spoke of nightmares, visions of her son's bloodied face that she just couldn't wake up from. Ooh. Then we have Warren Visser. He was a computer engineer from Plumstead. The 22-year-old Warren Visser was an altar boy turned dreamer. It was reported that hours before he died, Warren had an argument with his mother, and that the media sensationalized it as a wound she carried for years after his death. But according to Marlene Visser, this was not true. She loved her son, and she has fought hard to protect his memory every single day for the past 22 years. Next, we have Gregory Berghaus. He was a visitor, not an employee. Gregory was a world-traveled antique collector based in New York, although originally from South Africa, who had come home to escape the northern winter. Gregory was a man who could make anyone feel seen, heard, and special. He just happened to walk into the wrong place on that fateful night. Then we have Aubrey Otgar. Now, he was the owner and heart of Sizzlers. Aubrey, or Eric as he was known in the industry, was a man with big plans. According to the manager of a rival studio, the two men were not friends, but they fought hard to keep drugs out of the industry in which they both worked. Beloved by his staff, respected by his clients, he was preparing to go to Europe and meet a man he had gotten to know online, and with the hopes of building it into something more. Aubrey, who believed in building something better, Aubrey was someone who believed in building something better until those hopes were ripped away. And finally, we have Quentin Taylor. 25-year-old Quentin Taylor was determined to face death head on, and that probably saved his life. The man who carried the memory of that night on his back into a courtroom. He was a young man with a rough past, a complicated life, but who refused to let the story die with him.
You know, it's what strikes me, NJ, is that when crimes like this become completely sensationalized, you start to form opinions, you start to think in stereotypes. But when you look at these individual men, they all look to me like people that I could pass anywhere on the street, in the grocery store, in a shop, anywhere. And it's a reminder that we're all human beings, and we need to look beyond that sensational nature of these crimes. And I got to say, I love that you said that he carried the memory of this on his back into the courtroom. That is a heavy, heavy burden to carry with you. Yeah.
Indeed.
I think that was a fitting tribute.
Thank you. I want to move on to Adam and Trevor. Now, Adam Wurst had dreams of opening a computer store. He was engaged at the time, and he had a gay brother. Nobody saw it coming. Then Trevor Tace was a taxi driver, trusted by the very people he would betray. He would often provide transport services to sex workers around Sea Point. Both were seen as mild, friendly, harmless. And on the night of January the 19th, 2023, they chose cruelty over humanity. Together, they unleashed one of the worst massacres Cape Town has ever seen. I want to play Elsabie's words on this quickly.
What a weird crime couple they were. So Wust was apparently working at some takeaway place in Greenpoint. And then Trevor was a taxi driver, like a cab taxi. And then they met somewhere in Greenpoint. And later, Wust was then a waiter in the V&A at a restaurant. And then they found some kind of weird friendship. But they were the most unlikely couple. There was a huge age difference. They didn't seem like, but they became partners in crime. How and what they had in common seemed unlikely.
And yet, somehow that unlikely friendship festered into something deadly. I want to move on to the build-up to the crime, okay? Let's walk back through the days and hours that led to bloodshed. Now, some of this you've heard before. Adam heard out the Sizzlers safe from an ex-employee, a guy named David, or a guy who worked under the name of David, who was a client or customer at Walter's Grill, where Adam worked in that takeaway place that Elsabie mentioned. But Adam wasn't the only one listening that night. Trevor Tace heard it too. And that is what changed everything. Trevor overhears this drunken confession by David that there's a safe there and it has lots of money. And apparently the seeds for what would come were planted that night. At first it was just a drunken conversation, but once the seeds were planted, they didn't stay ungerminated for very long. Now, Adam left Cape Town in October 2002. October 2002. He went back to George. Now, he was originally from George. I don't know if he had a falling out with his fiance or what, but I just know that he went back to George, and that's he was there from October until I think early December, if memory serves. When he returned to Cape Town, the pieces started slotting in together. and he moved into an apartment that was dangerously close to Sizzlers. There is actually a picture of the. I've got a picture of the Bordeaux apartments where he stayed. If we can just throw that up on the screen, please, or not.
Well, look, I'll ask, this in this lead up to this. This started off as a heist, right? This was money based. Do you think there was some point?
That was the theory. That was
Right.
what they said.
What do you think? Do you think this could have ended any other way than in this amount of bloodshed?
I don't know. To be honest, I don't believe for a second that it was that it was just a robbery gone wrong. But let's not. Oh, there we are. You can see that is a photo taken from Adam Wust's flat, and that is Sizzlers right across the road.
It's funny. It doesn't strike me as a place that would be called Sizzlers. When I think Sizzlers, I think, well, one, of a steakhouse, but two, of, if it's going to be a club or a brothel, I don't think of it as in a residential house. But again, it's branded.
And that's the thing. Unfortunately, because of the nature of the industry at that time, where we would often get raided by the police, not because we were soliciting sex, but because we were men soliciting sex to men.
Gotcha. So, this, I guess, in the audience's mind's eye, I don't know about them, but I know with me, I was thinking more of, something with a neon sign out in front. It's not. There's no signage. This was just known within the community as Sizzlers, correct?
Yeah, it was.
Gotcha.
Basically, we used to advertise in the newspaper, and people would put ads in the classifieds. People would respond to the ads, and we would say, "Okay, fine, we have a venue. You can come to us," or we would go to you. It was purposefully kept nondescript.
Would they advertise the address, or would that be something you'd call? Right.
They would phone, and then you would arrange the booking, provide them the address, and so on and so forth.
Gotcha.
It's how a lot of raids happened.
Yeah.
We would willingly invite undercover police officers into the venues.
Yeah.
I worked out of a massive house in Sandton. I worked out of a flat down in Cape Town. I worked out of a townhouse complex in Melrose. I worked out of a manor house out in Pretoria East. So they out of necessity, they had to be, just look like a normal commune.
Yeah, right. I'm sure. Yeah, for discretion and security.
Yeah. Okay, so when Adam came back, he started working at Key 4 in the waterfront. And this is where things started to... Now, Key 4 is a restaurant. And this is where things started to, the ball started rolling, good and proper. Trevor joked about robbing Sizzlers, getting into that safe, and guns were discussed. We're going to need to have some sort of take something with us to effect the robbery. Mm-hmm. Trevor, being a coloured man, as I discussed last week, decided that it would be easier for him to get the guns in Mitchell's Plain. So it was decided, okay, let's do this. But now there was tensions not rising between Sizzlers and one of their neighbors. Now, this is Juan Duval Ace. I've got a picture of him. Now, he had a dark past, okay? and he got into a feud with Aubrey, where he reported Sizzlers to the city of Cape Town for operating a business without a license. One problem: you didn't get a license for running a brothel.
Right.
Anyway, in the aftermath of what happened, he claimed that he received a threatening phone call, Juan, in which the caller, who was unnamed and unidentified, basically threatened Juan, but mistook him for Aubrey, or Eric, as he was known in the industry. Nobody ever followed up on whether any call like that came in on Juan's phone, or whether it even happened. But this is, everything seems to, the stories always tend to come to light in the aftermath, and we just don't know how accurate they are. So the air was thick with warnings nobody heeded. And just before the massacre, Adam found himself alone and untethered. On the Friday, so this happened on the 20th of January, which is a Monday morning. So on the Friday before, Adele then went off to Joburg. And she went to go and visit family in Johannesburg, leaving Adam alone and unsupervised.
Mm-hmm.
Around the same time, according to Juan, Warren Fisser phoned Juan and requested a meeting. Warren didn't explain. Juan assumed it was a Sizzlers issue. Then, on the Sunday morning, Trevor arrives. And according to their statements, he was feeling very upset because his girlfriend had left him for another woman. And again, hearsay, who knows? And during this conversation, Trevor takes out a gun and places it on the table and says, well, there's one. I've got another one. Let's do this shit. So by Sunday morning.
In hindsight, there were warning signs.
Sorry?
In hindsight, there were warning signs, but it seems almost improbable that they would have been connected without a crime to weave the thread through them.
Exactly. Now, so by Sunday morning, the plan wasn't just theory anymore. There were a lot of moving pieces, a lot of confusion, a lot of things that came out afterwards that may or may not have been true. Who the fuck knows? It's just the plan, according to in Adam and Trevor's view. It now wasn't just a theory. It had teeth. That morning, they went to Trevor dropped Adam at the V&A waterfront, where he bought latex gloves at a pharmacy, and wanders around the waterfront, then makes his way home. Warren again calls Juan, and it basically says that he got an upsetting phone call that even now on Sunday evening. He got an upsetting phone call, and he would like to meet. And Juan says that he was unfortunately busy. Juan claimed that it was family issues. Warren's mother refuted this to me personally when I spoke to her after we emailed back and forth. She said that there were no family issues. Like I said, none of the calls between Juan, Duval, Ace were ever confirmed, and it's very likely that this whole subplot was Juan inserting himself into the story. We will be taking a deeper dive into this character, but more on that next time. So we're now on Sunday evening. Adam is in Clifton at a club called Lamed, and he gets a call from Trevor saying, "We're doing it now, come." And Trevor then picks Adam up at Club Med, and they go back to the Bordeaux apartments where Adam lived. They packed up guns, gloves, rope, tape, took a kitchen knife, and the night's machinery was already whirring. All that remained was setting the final bait.
Yeah, they were ready. They were ready
Yes.
for this.
And they went down to a service station on Sea Point Main Road, where they made a call from a call box, a public phone, and basically said, "We'd like to book someone, and we'll come through. Give us a few minutes." They then went to a service station, supposedly the same service station that will become important to the story later on, the Total service station. And they bought a 2-liter cool drink bottle of petrol, gasoline. And finally, the ingredients were in place. The clock was ticking. Oh, one thing I forgot they also packed was balaclavas. They put balaclavas into their bag.
Right.
Now, at Sizzlers, the phone rings again. It's a guy by the name of Greg Berghaus. He wants to book a monsieur, and he books Sergio, who worked under the name Paolo, and so he arrives, and for the booking, he's let in. Sergio and Greg go off to Studio 1, and the boys are sitting in a dorm room. Now, there's basically a room with beds and with bunk beds against, I think, 2 of the walls, if memory serves, and an open area. They were basically sitting there in the room, apparently watching the movie, from what I heard. There was somewhere mention of it being, I think, Broken Hearts Club or something, or some other gay themed movie. Anyway, and so they were all sitting there, and then again the doorbell rings, and Timothy goes, lets in these 2 clients who are coming, and who want to see Ryan. Now, Ryan was Stephanus, the 17-year-old, and they're led off to another studio where they are, where Stephanus then goes to meet them. Nobody knew what had come knocking at Sizzler's door that day.
Yeah.
So they go into the room. They leave the bottle of petrol at the out on the front step, out of sight when you open the door. But they go inside. They have the guns on them. They have their backpack on them with rope and everything they'll need, and they are led to a studio. And as they get in, Stephanus then comes down, goes into the studio, and everything seems normal. And then all of a sudden, there is a gun in Stephanus's face.
But this is where, to me, it becomes apparent that they weren't going to leave anybody alive there that night. They didn't have the balaclavas on. There was no attempt to. Did they have their gloves on?
Not that I found that in my because if you're going to walk in, to a studio with gloves on, it may look odd.
Right.
If you're going to rob the place, you would put the balaclava on, you put the gloves on, so make sure that you're never going to
Right.
you won't be caught. There's just so many inconsistencies. There's so many questions left in this in the story that even now, 22 years later, we still don't have all the answers.
I wonder if the balaclavas were there for to evade closed caption TV when they made their escape. Although 22 years ago, that wasn't as pervasive as it is now. It seems to me, with all of the accoutrements that they brought, everything they brought, they were intent on killing lots of people and burning this place down, and destroying any trace of them being in there, whether it's witnesses or fingerprints. It's the balaclava that's the big question mark.
Exactly, and as we will get to later, they did actually put the balaclavas on when they left.
Okay.
But if you're just going there to rob the place, you would put them on at the door at least.
Totally.
So Stefanos goes off to the studio, guns are drawn, and he suddenly has a gun in his face. Now this is more or less where we stopped the last time. One day it's a regular Sunday, Monday morning, and the next thing, things are chaos.
Yeah.
Stefanos is forced out of the studio into the dorm room, and there is confusion. Everybody thinks that this one Stefanos falls into the room. They don't understand why. They think it's some sort of joke. Then Aubrey is pushed into the room by Trevor, and he immediately recognizes Adam from Walter's Grill, because everybody used to go to Walter's Grill. It was close, it was convenient, so everybody went to Walter's Grill. Adam knew people from Sizzlers. That's how he got to meet David, because it was a well frequented eatery.
Yeah.
So Aubrey gets shoved into the room by Trevor, and he sees Adam and goes, "I know you." So even now, some try to believe it's just a robbery, but as you say, the illusion is already dying, because now he's been recognized by the owner.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the terror must have been seeping into, perhaps not, the terror, obviously, but real and genuine fear that they weren't going to come out of that place alive must have started to seep into their consciousness, which is heavy to think about, enduring that.
Yeah. So Aubrey demands answers. He wants to know what the fuck. And he's pistol whipped by Adam. And Adam then demands the money from the safe. And Aubrey doesn't want to leave the boys alone. So he tells Timothy to go, Timothy was the manager, to go and open the safe, give him what's inside. And according to court papers, the sum total inside the inside the safe was 2,000 rand.
Right.
Nothing. Which is kind of surprising, because it was during season. So there were still a lot of tourists in Cape Town in December, January, February. You would think on a Sunday night, when the banks aren't open on Sundays, back then, our banks, none of our banks were open on Sundays. You would think that there would be more money on the premises. So I do get that they would have expected. There was a possibility that they could have done a deposit at an ATM, but it does seem a little unlikely. And also, a lot of agencies used to work on cash because there's less likely that the police would be alerted by someone who's suddenly getting a lot of money from where.
Sure. Hard. Yeah. Easy to hide from the tax man as well. And what did we say for context? That was about $300.
Yeah, it's about $300.
It's shocking.
So anyway, so the all of them are tied up, laid on the floor. Now, okay, so I just want to mention again that this is going to be quite traumatic. If you knew any of the victims, you may want to actually, know about now, because I do want to show images of the crime scenes sketches, but it is going to what follows is going to be pretty grim. So anyway, so the victims were laid down on the floor, and they attempted to tie them up with rope, but they brought this nylon rope which doesn't tie very well, and so their bonds would easily come untied. So then they were bound with tape. They left the nylon rope on there, but they're also bound with tape. You actually see there's impressions of the rope into wrists and ankles.
Ligature marks.
Yeah. And they were told all to lie face down. And Quentin Taylor refused. His attitude was, if I'm going to die, I want to be able to look death in the face.
Stunning courage.
Many people believe that is what saved his life.
Wow.
So they were gowned. They were also gagged with socks, shoved socks in their mouth and tape over their mouth. But not all of them had. Not all of them stayed gagged. Some of the gags came loose. It was very much amateur hour.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
They didn't think it out very clearly. They didn't have the experience. They clearly did not have. Neither of them had done any sort of research into how not to get screwed, get caught. And it definitely wasn't a professional hit. Adam and Trevor then ransacked the house, trying to find anything of value, trying to find this supposed money that was vast sums of money that was lying around. They didn't find any more cash. And then Quentin said he heard Adam on a phone call. Now, Adam denies that any phone call was that there was any phone call. His phone records were never looked into, as far as we know, by the police. So there's no. The police claimed that they checked the phone records and there was nothing, but according to someone else, Juan Deval Ace, he phoned the house around 2 a.m. to speak to Warren. Now, Warren had a cell phone. if it was such a secret, why would Juan phone the landline?
Right.
So, but according to Quentin, he heard Adam on the phone. When Adam and Trevor found nothing, their frustration turned to rage, and they stormed back to the dorm, and things started to escalate. From the kitchen, he had retrieved a steak knife, and this was the moment that the night turned from theft to slaughter. Between the two of them, they started to throat slash the victims. Adam and Trevor worked from opposite ends. Trevor's cuts were shallower than Adam's, which Quentin's testimony supports this. Adam's slashes were a lot deeper. Now, you asked last time if they survived the throat slashing, and in my fluster, I said that some of them did survive, but I may have misspoken. As you'll hear in a bit, we actually don't know. Some may have, others may have not. Possibly the ones, the guys that whose throats Trevor slit may have survived. The guys that Adam slit because his slits are deeper may have not. We just don't know.
Right.
We don't know how long they would have survived afterwards. So while Trevor then decides, okay, he needs to take a break, and he goes to the kitchen to, well, he says to have a drink of water. Meanwhile, Adam goes outside, grabs the petrol, comes back in, and starts to douse the boys in the dormitory, and the men in the dormitory with the petrol. That's when, obviously, they now think they're about to be burnt alive. They start screaming bloody murder. Well, bad turn of phrase, but yes, they start screaming, and this alerts Sergio, who is in the next room.
Right.
Yes, and he then unlocks the door of the studio he and Gregory are in, and steps out. At that stage, Trevor is standing in the passage, sees Sergio, and goes, there's another one here. And he rushes up into the room, and he finds not one, but two. Now, they could have been naked. They could not have been naked. They may have been naked at the time and were told to get dressed. But either way, they were caught. And they were caught and kept in the room. Now, Adam comes. Trevor's now got them in the room. Calls Adam to bring tape and rope, and Adam then comes along and rushes in, and they then tie him up. Trevor goes back to the dorm while Adam is tying up these two, and according to Trevor, he was giving the boys. He was trying to tell the boys, listen, it's all okay. Everything's gonna be fine. You just stay calm, and we'll be on our way soon.
Meanwhile, they've got to smell gas. They've heard screaming.
Yes. Now I don't know if Trevor said this to basically cover his own ass. Where I had nothing to do with wanting to kill them. I thought we were going to just go there, rob the place, and leave.
Doesn't compute.
Who knows? Perpetrator statements should be taken with a grain of salt the size of Uganda.
True, accurate.
So Gregory and Sergio are tied, gagged, and also doused in fuel.
Oh. Oh.
And cries and shouts are heard from the studio. And then, right, while Trevor is in the dorm, Adam goes out, and I presume with the petrol on their wrists, that loosened the tape, and Gregory gets loose,
Mhm.
and he attacks Adam, and they struggle. They end up in the bathroom. Trevor comes along and pistol whips Gregory, but Gregory charges again, and they struggle. They end up in the bathroom, and a shot is fired, and Gregory is shot in the stomach.
Wow.
He collapses onto the bathroom floor, but he is not dead. They realize, okay, a shot has been fired, and they now need to. They're now going to have to deal with the others.
They must have been fearful that somebody outside may have heard, that
Yes.
a neighbor could alert the police. Yeah, that would have, even the sound of a gunshot is so, even in that situation, can rattle you. So
yes,
I can imagine it just heightened the situation.
And so, according to reports, Sergio was executed first, shot in the back of the head. Trevor, according to his statement, protested the assassinations, but Adam insisted, and they then went to the dorm, and again, like with the throat slashings, they worked from either side, and they shot. According to Trevor, he shot Quentin, but Quentin looked him in the eye, and that caused him distress. And so when he shot, he flinched, and I think he hit him in the jaw. Adam then finishes Quentin off with a second shot. With them now done, Adam then grabs the bag. Trevor unlocks the gate. They put their masks on, their balaclavas on, and they run out onto the street. They run down Graham Road, and they get into a car, into a white BMW that is around the corner. And the time was 3 a.m. on Monday morning.
How do you even begin to process a crime like this with such a combination of viciousness, violence, but also, on the perpetrator's part, stupidity and such poor planning? As you said, it was amateur hour. To me, I can't even. There are so many inequities and strange occurrences within this. I have no idea what their plan was, with no idea what their intention was. So, I'm shocked that it wasn't more of a bungled robbery that ended with no violence. And that, once they realized what they were in for, I'm almost surprised that they didn't exit and deal with the consequences. To escalate like this without an exit plan just seems ridiculous.
Yes. The whole situation was just, it made no sense. Like I said, there's so many unanswered questions, and so many inconsistencies in the statements and the stories, and it just didn't seem to make sense that it would that what they were saying is what they planned, but they also went about it in the stupidest of ways.
Right. You know?
So
Yeah.
anyway,
Inexplicable.
I want to go now on to what happened afterwards. So over in the Bordeaux apartment building where Adam had his flat, a guy by the name of Yaku. Now, not as far as I know, this is not his real name, but Yaku, who stays with his partner Shane, also possibly not his real name. Yaku's woken up and he because he heard gunshots, and he goes off to the balcony and he sees two men fleeing down Graham Road in the direction of Marais Road, and they have masks on, and so they see these two running away. They can't tell. They can't figure out why, but they assume something's not right here, and they alert the police. On Marais Road, where the BMW was parked, Darren and his girlfriend Ashley are sitting in their car, and they're just chatting. I think Darren was dropping Ashley off. She stayed in Marais Road, and they were just chatting when they hear gunfire, and suddenly they see two men run to a white BMW, and they go, "We need to get the fuck out of here." And they start the car and drive down the road, and the BMW starts to chase them. Now, you don't know if, are you going to die? Are you about to be shot? And they turned, they got to the traffic light and they turned left, and the BMW turned right.
Oh my God, the relief that they would have felt.
They were like, okay, no, they were just getting away. So we weren't being chased, but they decide they then go and they stop at a BP service station, if memory serves, and they then call the police.
Right.
And let them know what they've just seen. Around the same time, a meter cab pulls up in front of Sizzlers, and Mark Hamilton gets out. And he is a known client of Sizzlers. He's been there before. He knows the drill. He knows the boys. He knows Eric. And he arrives, and first thing he notices is the gate is open. The garden gate is open.
Right. Yeah.
And he finds this odd.
Yeah.
He then steps into the garden and walks to the front door, and the security gate is open.
Right.
And there's a smell of petrol in the air. And he smells something else, a sweet smell that he can't quite put his finger on. And then he walks into the house, and he sees that the dorm room door is open, which is very unusual. And so he carries on going, and he walks into the dorm room to see what the hell's going on, and he sees bodies. And he, not to put too fine a point on it, freaks the fuck out.
Yeah, I can only imagine that's going to be an image that's going to stay with him for the rest of his life. The terror.
And he rushes out, and he phones 112, which is basically the equivalent of 911 here in South Africa. Police and paramedics then swarm the scene. Now, I want to introduce you to one of the paramedics. If you can please play the clip.
My name is Nick Nevin. I'm an emergency care practitioner. Layman terms, I'm an advanced life support paramedic. Currently, I manage and co-founded a medical tech company But back in 2003, I was the operations manager for a premier private ambulance service here in Cape Town, and operating both in management as well as operationally.
Okay, so Nick was there that morning. What comes next is going to be hard to hear. Putting together this clip, I listened to his full interview, and
so the night of the Sizzlers Massacre, or the day before, so I would have been at home. I lived in Greenpoint at the time, and actually I was off duty. The siren unit in my response vehicle had blown, so it wasn't really technically safe for me to be responding anywhere on an emergency level. So I actually wasn't technically available. So that night at dinner, I'd gone to bed relatively early, but because I was a senior manager, I was still available for telephonic sort of consultation and, you know, assistant managing of my staff, etc. So I was technically still working. And in the early hours of the morning, I was contacted by the control room to say that they had activated a response and that our closest paramedic was coming from N1 City, and they had requested if I could at all possible to assist them, because it sounded like a particularly large potential scene, or a scene for potentially large amount of casualties. And I wasn't far away. My light system was working, and it was the early hours of the morning, so I wasn't expecting to require a siren unit anyway, or a hooter. So I said I would go down and I'd drive carefully and obey the speed limit basically, and since it wasn't so far away, I would probably get there before them anyway. So I was driving down Main Road Seapoint, and the first thing I noticed was that there was an ambulance with its lights on and a police vehicle at the total garage. And so I pulled in there initially. As I said, the information we often get is not always accurate. So I pulled in there initially, and they were packaging a patient, so they were preparing the patient for transport. And they had said that they were fine, they didn't need any assistance from me, but I should head down the closest side road to where the resources were required. So I drove down the side road, and I noticed quite a large police presence. There were a few emergency service vehicles, and the road was barrier taped off. So I parked on the side, I got all my equipment, I entered through the barricade and walked towards the house, which at the time seemed like quite a distance. I don't know if it was the flashing lights and being in the dark, but it seemed like a bit of a walk, which in reality it actually wasn't. I got directed by a police officer to enter the house. I walked into the house, and there just seemed like there was chaos. There were people everywhere walking left, right and center. There were police officers arguing with ambulance personnel about where to walk, where to step. And I got directed into a bedroom on the left, the first bedroom on the left. I opened the door, and there were several bodies all stacked along next to each other. And one of my ambulance crew members was sitting at the head of one, and he was manually ventilating a patient with a resuscitator. And he just looked at me with an expression I actually hadn't seen before, which seemed to be with plead, like requiring the assistance. So I approached him, we changed positions, I managed the patient, we put an airway into the patient, we put drips up on the patient, we gave a lot of fluid, and it was hard to concentrate on the process of what we were doing, considering what was going around, what was happening in the immediate vicinity. I mean, I've been on many multi-casualty incidences, but I mean, it just struck me as bizarre. They were all well placed. They were all right next to each other. There was more blood than I'd ever seen before, and I had seen a lot of blood. It was a stark contrast to some of the others, just from a volume and a sort of a almost horrific first sight. It almost, as I walked into the room and I saw it, and the pleading look on the ambulance crew's face, it kind of like was a punch in the gut. Like you almost had to stop and you know, and it wasn't my first sort of traumatic scene. Anyway, managed the patient. There was a lot going on. We managed to get our patient outside, and we needed to re-put the airway in because of the severity of the patient's injuries. He had a severe head injury, so they often don't sedate particularly well, so we had to stop and we had to resedate and we had to remanage the patient's airway, and then we managed to move our patient off to Grooterskloof Hospital. And then by the time we were finished handing over in casualty, the other ambulances and crews were arriving with their patients from the house. I think there were 3 or 4 in total that we managed to take to hospital.
Poor
Yeah,
man.
they managed to take to the hospital. So yeah, and basically 7 Graham Road, which had been known as a house of pleasure, was now a house of horror.
Okay, let me ask you this: are there any theories as to why the house wasn't set ablaze after, you know, spreading the petrol and you know, were they just too stressed? Is there any explanation to this, or have
No.
the perpetrators ever provided it? No.
There was never any explanation given for why they didn't set the place ablaze. They did say that they wanted to that the petrol was used as an intimidation tool only, but there are there are other ways to intimidate people without you would think that it would be a case of toss the petrol. Oh, okay, we need to destroy evidence, chuck a match. But I don't know if the fact that Greg attacked Adam and the shot was fired, it wasn't a planned killing.
Right.
It was Greg jumped the gun. And so maybe that threw them off, and they didn't actually think of setting the place ablaze. They just wanted to get the hell out of there. They shot everybody and they left.
So many strange circumstances.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it was just the stress or the adrenaline that prevented the house from being set ablaze.
Yeah, right. That's good theory, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So, according to my how I envisioned it, Adam and Trevor went to Belleville. They always said that they left Cape Town, and so I assume that they would have gone to Belleville because it seemed like the most logical place to go. It's the next city over from Cape Town, even though it falls under the city of Cape Town. There is quite a cultural divide between Cape Town and Belleville, Durbanville. They discarded the gloves and the balaclavas along the way, and according to one of the reports I found, Adam basically said that they never speak of this again. He basically told Trevor, "Shut the fuck up."
Yeah.
But according to Elsaby, who was in court, they went to Grand West Casino for breakfast.
Oh my.
So I want to play you a part of Elsaby's interview where she talks about what they did afterwards.
They went to Grand West Casino where they ate and drank beer. I mean, just after they've done this. And then Wust came back in another form of transport back to the city. I also think a taxi. And then he told Tace to get rid of the gun that they used, or the guns. I think, I'm not sure if there was 1 or 2, but it doesn't matter. And then he proceeded to drive on the N1 for a long way, more than 100 kilometers, and he took the guns apart and threw it out of the window. And it was never found. All along the way, pieces of it, and they were never ever found.
They were never found. So, according to the reports, the pieces of the gun were disposed in the vicinity of Worcester, which is, as Elspie said, about 100 kilometers outside of Cape Town, on the N1, which is the main highway between Cape Town and Johannesburg. And once he got rid of all the pieces, and he then turned around and drove back to in the direction of Cape Town. But for the next 2 days, he didn't go home. Trevor did not go home. He basically drove around aimlessly, slept in his car when he got tired. Adam, on the other hand, went about his life without a care in the world. Like nothing had happened.
It's funny, the different responses to this. Do you think one of them was more calculated and cold than the other, and had an idea of what the actual intention was? Do you think Adam was more sinister?
That is the impression that I've gotten. And if you look at, well, actually, I don't want to speak too much about Adam now, but anybody who's read a newspaper in South Africa will know that he still, to this day, doesn't seem to show any remorse.
Wow. Cold, man. Cold.
Yeah. Okay, so let us jump back to 7 Graham Road. And I want to show you I want to enlighten you as to the profound effect that this case had on the first responders. Now, I mentioned earlier that they may or may not have died quickly, and Nick, the paramedic, actually explains what happens when your throat is slit. If you can play that clip, please.
Wow.
So when the type of death that one may experience when having their throat slit is, in my opinion, not a particularly pleasant one. It can be relatively quick, and when I say relatively, I mean within a few short minutes, and that is only dependent on whether they have managed to slice through the large arteries in your neck and some of the large veins. Often, though, the victim tends to either retract their neck or pull their chin down, etc., because of fear of pain, etc., and it's not necessarily a clean slice. And often if your esophagus and your trachea are cut, then you will get blood pooling into your airway, so your trachea will get, and you will start to choke and have that sensation of drowning. I can only imagine that one experience in this would be quite lucid and have moments of panic, specifically if they are battling to breathe. I do remember a case in Johannesburg. I wasn't personally involved in the case, but where a woman was beaten quite severely, raped, and they slit her throat in the attempts to kill her. And in fact, actually, that was that slitting of her throat that actually saved her life. That actually opened up her airway, and the way she was lying, she was then able to breathe. And they didn't manage actually to cut anything vital. But if there is things that are vitally cut, it'd be painful and quite scary, but by no means instantaneous.
Oh,
by no means instantaneous.
Lord. That is more than I ever wanted, expected, or to know about those moments, those poor people.
Yeah. So it wasn't a pleasant way to go.
No.
As Nick so really said, it's not a very pleasant way to go. I went, well, there's a masterpiece understatement.
Yeah, right.
It's fucking horrific.
Yeah, it really is.
So, Timothy Boyd, Sergio De Castro, Stefanos Roshia, Johan Meyer, Travis Reed, and Aubrey Otgar were all declared dead at the scene. Marius Meyer, Warren Fisser, and Gregory Berghaus were taken to Grote Schuur, which is out south of Cape Town, the Cape Town CBD. And Quentin Taylor was taken to Somerset Hospital, which is near the waterfront. Paramedics battled to save them. I want to just play you some more of Nick's interview.
So what really
About
struck
the
me about
devastation.
the scene was the perception that I had of the amount of aggression and sort of devastation that people had done this to other people, which might sound a bit bizarre considering, as I said, previously up until this point, I'd seen a significant amount of interpersonal violence. Housebreakings in Joburg tend to be quite violent, where they tend to torture children and get the parents in order to, open safes, etc. But nothing quite on a scale like this had been. I've been to many murder-suicides where, you see a lot of blood, but this was multiple people with significant devastation. And there was blood everywhere. There was blood on the ceiling. And, it was bizarre. In the room that I had been directed to, I think there were at least five bodies. I remember another colleague of mine, in fact, the paramedic that had been coming from N1 City, had been directed to the bathroom where he was treating a patient. So that was 6. I had, at that particular time while I was in the house, I wasn't aware of any other patients except for the one that had been up at the petrol station, which I think puts it at about 7. And then by the time we had all handed our patients over and kind of all stood there on the trauma deck of Grote Schuur Hospital in a stunned silence, which is unusual when you have multiple EMS personnel around any scene after you've handed over and done what is necessary. There's generally banter and chit-chat. I think I'd learnt of another 2 patients that had been in another room somewhere else. So to my knowledge, that at that point there had been 9. And the atmosphere was particularly somber, which again is unusual amongst experienced emergency personnel. It's what we do. We are able to cope with the processes quite well, and often there's as I said, there's banter and some dark humor in order to sort of cope with some of the stuff that you might have seen. But there was a complete generalized silence. I mean, the sun was starting to rise at that point. And I don't think I'll ever have looked at the trauma deck of Grote Schuur quite the same ever again. None of us actually could believe what we had just experienced.
That's chilling.
Yeah. They just couldn't believe what they'd experienced.
And Jay,
Marius,
just a quick question. Who made it to the petrol station?
Sorry?
Who made it to the petrol station? Somebody
Quentin.
made it out. Oh, it was
Yes.
Quentin, the survivor.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, Quentin basically, he got out of the house. Sorry, I glossed over that.
It's okay.
Quentin actually left the house before Mark arrived, the client.
Gotcha.
He walked up to the service station, which is where, which was the scene that Nick drove past and stopped at first.
Right.
He basically walked in there, bloody, throat slit, jaw hanging all weird because of how he was shot. So he staggered up there, and the service station attendants then called the police. When Nick drove past there, he stopped there. They said, "No, we're good. We're packaging the patient." And then he went down to, and then they said, "Just go down to Graham Road. Go down this road here."
Right.
And then he drove down, and then he got to the corner of Graham, and I can't remember what the other road is. It's not Bray, it's the other one.
Yeah.
But he got there and then walked down. But Quinton was up at the service station, and
Gotcha.
Maurice Meyer and Warren Fisser died later that day.
Yeah.
Gregory Berghaus managed to cling to life for another 4 days before passing away from his injuries. Quinton was put into, if memory serves, put into a drug-induced coma to allow him to heal, but he stabilized. And this was their first glimmer of hope.
Mhm.
But this impacted not only, the queer community was shattered by this. This was a shock that this could happen. Nobody knew what it was. Was it a hate crime? Was it a drug? Was it drug related? Was it gang related? There were so many questions, and then you have people like Juan Ace who was throwing in bits and pieces of story that may or may not have been true. We don't know. He was a bit of a shyster, a known shyster, and so you couldn't really be certain of what was going, of what was true, what was false, what was speculation. But this also impacted the people who were there, the first responders. I want to play you part of of Nick's interview, where he talks about the vulnerability he felt. If we can please play that clip.
In the years since that scene, I've still gone on to see significant amount of trauma and devastation, but I've never quite seen something that just left you feeling just so vulnerable. I remember coming home after finishing up our documentation, etc., on the trauma deck of Redeskeur, and letting the call center know we'd cleaned all our equipment. I can't remember if my girlfriend, now wife, was getting ready to go to work yet, or if she was still in bed. But I remember we had a third story walk-up apartment with a little trellis gate. And I remember as I closed that trellis gate, feeling so vulnerable that no one is safe, that we're not safe. I was 23 years old at the time, and just thinking that if this is what people are capable on such a large scale, this sort of level of sadistic aggression, if someone comes into your house, none of us are safe. I just couldn't believe how vulnerable I felt at that point. It was a harsh sort of awakening, even though I was really well versed in having seen what people can do to each other, but often it was more isolated, or you knew there was drugs or alcohol involved, or you knew there was something else, that there was a precursor, and this just seemed like a protracted period of extreme torture that I can only liken to what I know about scenes of the Holocaust. It was a hollow feeling.
It seems absolutely savage.
Yeah. Yes. So the killers slipped away into the dark. Sirens faded, the emergency lights went dark, and Graham Road grew quiet. The curb outside Sizzlers filled with flowers and messages, a makeshift memorial to the dead. But behind hospital walls, one man fought to live. One man fought to tell the world what had happened. So yes, I think that is a good place to bring this one to a close.
I can't wait to hear how Quentin's survival impacts all this and the things that he recalls. I can't wait to hear about the police investigation, and I can't wait to hear about the aftermath with families, friends, and the community. You know, having been to South Africa, I sometimes think that South Africans have become somewhat desensitized to violence, but this is so horrific. It seems to me like it, and even because it involved a subculture, it seems it seems that the violence transcends it and would, you know, make headlines. I can't wait to hear more about that next time.
Yeah. So yes, next time we'll get into the arrests, we'll get into the investigation, we'll get into the arrests, we'll get to the trials, and we may even get to the conspiracy theories surrounding this case.
Oh, I'm sure. Right.
There are a few people that don't believe that the real story actually came out. I'm one of them.
Oh, all right. I can't wait to hear.
So yes, I'm just really grateful that you basically sat through this, and you are sitting through this, and you allow me to, you know, remember their names. This is the hardest part of the story to tell, because you want to respect the victims, but you also don't want to trivialize their deaths.
Yeah.
I have no intention to, you know, sensationalize this, but not telling the full story is it's a disservice to their memory.
I agree. I think it's important.
So yeah, let's wrap this up here. First of all, if you stand with us against cruelty, against erasure, hit like, subscribe, smash the subscribe button, ring the bell, and you can join us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/ACMQ pod. And let's build a platform that ensures victims' voices never get buried. I want to thank Derek. Thank you so much for sticking with me as I tell this insane story. I want to thank Amy behind the scenes for making us look like we know what the fuck we're doing.
True.
And I want to thank all of you for watching, who are helping keep the memory of those who are lost alive. So we'll not be here next Thursday, but we'll be here Thursday after. So see you all then. Thanks. Cheers.